Hello, I'm Michael Redmond, professional 9-dan Go player. In this video, I'll be showing you a game I played against O Meien. He was a 7-dan at the time, one of the top players in Japan. And in this tournament, this is the 10-dan tournament, the third section just before I got into the final section of the 10-dan tournament. So this was the game directly following my game against Kiyonari Tetsuya 9-dan, which was in a separate video. In this game, I have the black stones, and I'm playing one of my favorite openings at the time, which was the low Chinese opening. And this was a very popular opening up to the point when computer programs stopped playing it. So that is just a few years ago. So it was popular at the time, and it lasted about 20 years at least. And it was popular before that also. So this was a very popular opening. The idea is basically to entice white into the right side of the board. It's a move that can be played instead of the more orthodox corner enclosure, which would be a move like this, or a move like this, which leaves white some room to enter the right side. Whereas the game move closes up the right side, makes it more difficult for white to enter, less room for white. So that was the idea that we had at the time, and it was basic theory for white to play an approach from outside. So this game move is very orthodox, the normal way to approach, and it's still a very good move, a valid move for white. Just to go back a move, just to show you what AIs like to play now, would be this 3-3 invasion, for instance, in which white would maybe play this kind of thing, and we get into a very ultra-modern opening. This is actually, on the upper side of the board, this is similar to a game that AlphaGo played against itself. And it played an identical shape here, and then finally played this extension. I'll figure out which game it is, maybe set up a link. It did play this game, or similar openings actually, in a number of its games that it played against itself in the 60-game series. Excuse me, that was a 50-game series. So this would be an ultra-modern move. Obviously, in 1988, we didn't think it was good, so I played the Chinese opening. And my opponent played this approach from outside. Another move that some computer programs might suggest would be the attachment here. It might actually be going out of fad. It might be losing its popularity. But the attachment here is a move that is suggested against the low Chinese opening. And also at this position, where in the game white played an extension. Another popular move that is also liked by computer programs would be the 3-3 invasion, and something like this, to invade the corner. And when black plays something like this, you can see that black's investment of a stone here is partially reduced in value when white invades this area. When white gets a position in this area, the value of that marked black stone is relatively small than if that had been a black territory. So since black has spent that one move in a way to make that territory in the upper right area, it becomes more valuable for white to be entering the upper right corner in this fashion. This would be about an even result, by the way. Otherwise, white could play the attachment now. Now this move is a move that has become popular. The idea is that if white plays some kind of an approach move here, then black will obviously kick and play something like this. And the pincer here is in a very good position to attack white. So this is supposedly good for black. This is supposed to be good for black. And computer programs would agree with that. So when white plays this move, and when black plays here, white has the option of switching around to be playing from the left side. And you might recall that when black has the 3-4 point in this direction, it is sort of awkward for white to be starting from the left side when black will have a very nice position here on the right side. This would be giving a bit too much for black. So the fact that white can start with this attachment, and for instance, if black plays like this, then white does get to move to the left. So the direction of play, at least, is very good for white. in which white is making a position on the lower side, and this cooperates with white's stone in the lower left corner and makes a whole sphere of influence pointing to the left side of the board. In actual play, black might not play that way, but will probably cut here actually and play an Atari here. Now this Atari is necessary because if black connects, white can capture a ladder, so that would not be good. That's why black plays an Atari here. Black doesn't really have to worry about the cut in the corner because this is locally, it's just a good position for black. With that pincer stone, reducing white's potential when we get to this position where white is not yet alive. So like if white plays something on the upper side, like this for instance, then this whole white group is already in trouble. There's no way for white to make a living shape. So if white plays here, then that is a small extension from the white group, and black can be happy to play something in the upper right corner. This would actually be a good result for black. And to avoid that, when black plays this move here, white will probably extend down here, in which case black will continue with a connection in the corner, and we get to something like this, which is maybe about even. I'd be perfectly happy to play with black in this position. So this is how I would refute white's attachment now. At the time, it was not even dreamed up, so it was very normal for white to be playing an extension on the upper side, while jumping into the 3-3 point was probably already an option. This is also a very popular move that was being played up to the point where AlphaGo adds master in the master version. Even in that series, it played against human players of 50 games on the internet, which was, I think it was in 2016, 17, somewhere around there. There was a number of games there was a game or so where it played in the 3-3 invasion, and there was a game where its human opponent played the 3-3 invasion, I think. This extension also is a very normal move. In general, when white plays an extension on the upper side in this case, an extension from the star point, I'll mark the two stones that I'm talking about, an extension from the star point to the upper side like that, in general it is a big move for black to play a kakari. So this is, in a way, it's old school, because some people nowadays would just play a 3-3 point invasion. This is the way that the computer programs like to play it. But at the time this was considered good. Both of them are valid moves, I believe. And against this, white played a pincer, so this is very normal. Again, this is a position where nowadays you might see people playing this move, which builds up white's position on the upper side. And this is also close enough to even. White does have a nice position on the upper side, but it's giving black an even easy time on the left. So for instance, black can push here, or black can play an extension on the side. Either way, black is getting a nice position on the left side. So the normal way for white to play here is to play a pincer. I think this is still pretty valid. With computer programs with what we call Go AIs, you do see some movement in the score, but it's not a big, not a mistake that I would be worried about. And black jumps into the 3-3 point. And at this point, black has a number of choices. So I play the old joseki here, and this is not liked so much by modern computer programs. So I have two choices. Like, I could have played the most popular move. This became very popular after this, and actually it was already a popular move. You might see this in my game against Miyazawa 9-dan. He wasn't a 9-dan at the time, but I did make a game against Miyazawa 9-dan that I played a very similar joseki, and in that game I did push here. So it was about the same time in 1988, and that shows that it was already a very popular joseki. White would follow by pushing through here, and this variation. At this point, this is the shape move. Hitting the head of black's two stones like this is a very good shape move. Otherwise, white could pull back here like this, but then black would just extend into the center. And this fight is supposed to be reasonably good for black. It's playable. Something like this would follow. White's position on the upper side is not all that safe, with a potential attachment here to cut on the third line. So there's that, and there's the fact that in the near future black will be hoping to dive into the 3-3 point in the lower left, which is also a large point. And black does not have a nice shape in the center of the board. So it's much more reasonable for white to play this key point. And in my game against Miyazawa, this was what happened, and my opponent could have pulled back then, probably giving white an advantage. So it was a similar position. If we just look at the local shape in the upper left corner, it was exactly the same. But instead, black will probably just take the one stone, and we get to this shape. And this is how the computer program Lila wants to continue, I believe. The joseki move would be to play some kind of a connection here and settle white's shape there. But actually human players also will invite black to cut here and start this kind of fight on the left side of the board, which is not really that dangerous for white when white is willing to sacrifice a stone here, this one. And in some cases white can sacrifice that stone, like if black, for instance, plays an attachment here, white will be able to sacrifice that stone. And it's not a big deal, like white could play from the center here and close black off also. Or white could just play some kind of capturing move on the left, like, something like this would work too. Both of those stones are not really, it's not necessary for white to save them, although white could with a capturing this move, with this move from underneath. So this was an option. Also, I could have played straight down here. This is also a joseki-like variation that was shown by the master version of AlphaGo in the master series, or the set of games that it played on the internet, and something like this with black diving into the 3-3 point again. This is a joseki that used to have black playing here, but you don't see that so much anymore, when AlphaGo liked to bump against white, which was previously called a vulgar move, but it's become mainline now. So I had these two choices in modern Go, but I chose this one. And extended on the side. Again, this is one more position where Lila would still want to dive into the corner here. And white plays here. And if I had played the enclosure here, I think it would still be close enough to an even game that I would be happy to play it now. So this is more or less even. The extension here is sort of weak on territory, so it's a move I might not play nowadays. But otherwise, there's no problem with this opening for black. This exchange here was spending a move on the side here, was a bit weak on territory when white gets sente, a tempo to invade the lower right area. So at this point, black is in a slightly difficult position, falling back in territory. But actually, this was a variation that I was generally happy to play. I was used to playing similar openings, so I felt I knew what I was doing. And it's a very subtle difference. It's notable that in this game, in 1988, the rules had the komi set at 5.5 points, so black was only giving 5.5 points. That means that actually, even though black seems to have lost a slight degree, maybe a point or so, with only 5.5 points komi, maybe it's a completely playable game. So this joseki followed. So black's jump here is an important point that secures black's territory on the lower side. So this territory. And it does make an attack on the white stone. So actually, it would have been better for white to play an attachment here. And then the extension. This would have been slightly better for white. Just getting a better position out into the center. This was the popular joseki at the time, but jumping here is a key point. And when white jumps out, black can continue the attack with this. And the problem with this variation, although it was called a joseki at the time, is that if white simply connects here, then black can play here and white does not have two eyes. White only can make one eye if white adds a stone to the side there. So this would mean that white has a group floating in the center of the board, not making much territory, and it would still be vulnerable to attack, which would reduce white's potential to make a moyo on the upper side, and it would not be so good for white. So white plays here, and this is to secure an eye or a living shape on the side. So white's making a territory here to gain a living shape. Meanwhile, black will get a secure hold on the area in the upper right part of the board, the upper right side. When white plays this attachment in answer to black's peep here, this is the one timing that white can play that move without fear of being captured. So I'm talking about the potential hane here, and when black plays this way, it is just a perfect shape for white to extend here and capture the peeping black stone here. So that was a wasted move for black. This stone, where black was hoping to exchange that black stone for white connecting, the fact that white has captured it from outside without spending a move to connect at the marked point, let's mark that point again, it means that white has sort of gained a move there. And white has an eye in the center and another eye here on the side that black cannot take away. So this white group is alive already. So this would be bad for black. So it shows that this is the one time that the timing that black cannot play this counterattack. Black has to cover from this side. White gets to pull back. So locally, this is actually a joseki, and my definition of a joseki is a set of moves that are good for both players. So it's arguable that both players are accomplishing something here. First of all, black has accomplished the fact that black's territory here is relatively secure, so that's important, and also the fact that the space between this stone and black's extension, which was all this way, that's being narrowed so that black does not really have to worry about any attacks in this area. So when this area is safe, black can add one stone to the upper right corner to create more or less finished territory. So black is securing territory in both of these two areas, and that means that in a way you could say black's attack was a success. And in the meanwhile, white has secured a living shape here. So this shape here, with if black plays, for instance, here, white can just answer here and it's alive. Otherwise, if black plays this point, again, white can play here, and this is also alive. This shape would be perfectly alive, and black would like to cut here but just loses all the stones, so that's not possible. And that means that these 2 points, for instance, just to keep it simple, these are 2 points that are interchangeable. White has an eye in this area and an eye with the 2 black stones, so white has a completely alive shape. So that's one of the important characteristics of this joseki, that white is completely alive, and that is made possible by white's final connection here. Without that move, for instance, if white had played away, a big move playing away would, for instance, be, this. This would be a very big move on the upper side. But black could cut here, and I think this is fine for black because now white is not alive. White is not alive on the side, and white needs to add a stone, for instance, here. So that would be a significant difference, with black getting some potential in this area. So I think that's just fine. I would continue with something towards the center and towards the upper side, like, for instance, I think now people would be playing a shoulder hit, something like this maybe, to reduce white on the upper side, and starting to build for black in the center of the board, just as a potential. And it's noticeable that black already has secure territories in these 2 sides. So next, black's moving towards the center. The left side of the board with, for instance, this kind of thing or this kind of thing against the corner. Also, apart from that invasion point, black also has this on the side. So black has plenty of places to invade the left side of the board And it's probably more important to reduce white on the upper side and start to build the center. So in the game, white connects and I played here. So with this move, this is actually a rather passive move. And I'm thinking at this time that I have a good game. And maybe with 5.5 points that's reasonable. It's going to be a close game. But nowadays I would play a bit more aggressively. I could do this, which would be a more aggressive way of surrounding the corner, or I could do this. This would also be a good way, a more profitable way to surround the corner. And this area is probably going to be black's territory in any case. So I might as well play the stronger move. This would be the most strong move, and if white extends, black can immediately invade on the upper side, and this would be just fine for black. I think this would be starting black's invasion on the upper side. There is still some potential for white to invade in the upper right corner with a move somewhere around here. Since the fight is moving to the upper side, it is a busy position for white too. This move was a very secure territory, made for a very secure territory. It was a bit passive, and white played very aggressively. So this is a point where white should have played a more solid move. This was actually, I do remember, although it was 30 so years ago, I do remember that we discussed this move directly after the game, and I thought it was an overplay, and my opponent was saying that he wanted to play aggressively and he couldn't find anything better. Recently Leela was suggesting the peep at A, so that would be the computer move. Why don't we make a variation for that? So playing here, and if black connects, probably backing off to the left side, something like this. When white plays here, this area will be a white territory. So as I said before, the left side is not all that important compared to the upper side and this center area. So with the peep, white has reduced black's potential towards the center, making a foothold to be moving out into the center. Next, white can be playing a move like this relatively safely. So white does have a relatively easy path into the center. Otherwise, white could play more aggressively even with this move, since white does have a group on this side, a living group on this side to connect up to also. So this would be a more aggressive, the mark point would be a more aggressive move for white, attacking black's right side territory, threatening to jump in on the third line here. So this looks just fine for white, especially if we assume a modern komi, which is 6.5, or in China that would be equivalent to 7.5 points. That would be completely different. In this game, this 5.5 points is probably just a very close game. White played here, and this was my chance, my opportunity to jump in here, which I did. And white plays an attachment on top. And this is where I wedged. A completely reasonable move, I believe. Otherwise, I could have extended here, and this would be relatively difficult, complicated. It does look like black can probably live. For instance, something like this would live at least. So it's not out of the question. It would be a more territory-oriented way to play. But I did have ideas to surround the center. So I wedged here, and if white covers from outside, this is going to be more effective. It's just going to be a lot easier for me to make a living shape there on the side. I would just play something like this. And I still have some potential to play here or play a clamp, taking advantage of white's weakness there. So that's the whole point. The fact that there's this cutting point in white's wall is the whole point of playing this wedge at the mark point. In the game, white did not allow that, and white played the cut from underneath. I think this is correct. And captured the one stone. So I played this move. I thought I was being clever. Actually, if I cut here, then the ladder favors white. So this will just not work. And with this white stone here blocking the ladder, it's just not going to work for black. So black has to find something a bit more effective. And so I played here. Now I find that it would be better to play here. In this case, white will probably capture anyway, and black can play this flank from the outside. So this would be a much better way for black to reduce white's territory. If white answers on this side, then I could just play this move, and again white has to choose between extending, which would still have some potential with the cut here and attachment on the outside. There would still be some potential for black to squeeze a little bit or use that potential, the aji there. Or white could play, more likely white will play the capture here, and black can extend, or even play away, but locally black would extend here and have a very nice position towards the center. So this would be a much more settled, comfortable way for black to play. So this was probably the better move. In the game I played here, and white played the Kengi connection, and I connected. So I've reduced the upper side down to the third line at least, and I have this move waiting to play. With the forcing move on the fourth line, I have a jump there that I can jump into white's territory and reduce it a little bit more. And white jumps out, cutting off my group here. So the question is, how do I deal with this L-shaped group on the upper side? I probably should have dived into the upper side a little bit more. This is the game move. I could have played here. Again, it's important that I have the forcing move here. That makes the difference. And so white will probably... White also has to defend that wall, and we would get into this kind of variation where black has grabbed some extra territory and black is looking at some weak points in white's position, like for instance this one. And white has a better position on the left, but black, in this case, when black plays first on the left side, black does have time to jump in. This would be a much more complicated fight. It looks about even. In fact, this game was, I would call it one of my better games because it seems to be even almost throughout the game. So I played this jump out. This is also a reasonable looking move, but a bit weaker than jumping into the white territory. And white plays here. At this point, if black extends down, it doesn't look very reasonable for black to do that. White can reduce the black territory, for instance, with something like this. It's going to be difficult for black to kill this way. So in the game I played here, and if white plays underneath, I can just play away. I might play something on the left side like this, and I will be looking at playing here, and you can see the whole wall that white has in this area is in danger of getting isolated. So at least I would be forcing white to play some passive moves in the area. So it makes sense that white plays towards here. This is a position where at the time of this game it was standard to play from the start point, play one, for instance, knight's move, one wide move, and then play a closed move to make the whole corner white's territory. With this position, it's reasonable to call this area a white territory. In modern Go, you often see a player play that move here. A double knight's move. The double knight's move is much more difficult to play. Although it is liked by a lot of computer programs, it's much more difficult to execute because there's the aji of the potential of this invasion on the 3-3 point, which can often lead to a ko. Like the most natural course of play leads to a ko like this, which would be a big deal for white too. White would be in danger of losing a huge territory there. And so although it's advised by some computer programs, I don't really like this move. It's not something that I would suggest to most amateur players, or especially Q players. So this makes sense. And black captured the upper right. So black has taken some territory here. In this game, black's territories are very well defined. So there's this territory here, which is less than 10 points. And there's this territory that is more than 20 points. So those two add up to about 30 points. Or a bit more than 30 points. And then there's this territory on the lower side, which is a comfortable 20 points. So I have about 50 points of territory. And white's territory is less well defined. There's this territory here, which is easy to see, which is about 6-7 points. And there's this territory, which I would usually call about 20 points. But the upper side territory is rather hard to say. White does need about 20 more points. White needs a stone on the upper side to catch up. In other words, if White plays, in fact I believe White did play a move on the upper side, so let's move one move forwards. When White plays here, White does have more than 20 points on the upper side, has a slight lead in territory, and I will counter that by starting to build in the center of the board. So it's a well-balanced position, I would say. So here I'm trying to build some territory in the center of the board, and this territory on the lower side is already more than 20 points. So the game is, at this point, very close. Black does have a slight lead before Komi, and some potential in the center of the board. This is a point where I was very impressed by a move that Lila suggested, which was the shoulder hit here. This is a very effective way for White to reduce the center and a jump. And so Black would probably now play something towards the left side. It could be the shoulder hit here, or I might be playing something like this, which would be looking to connect underneath. I would be going fairly deep into the left side, or at some point Black could try invading on the 3-3 point, which would be a bit complicated. If White answers here, it does create some forcing moves involving the attachment here. So it's not going to directly amount to very much, but for instance, if White plays here and Black plays here, we can see in some cases Black getting some forcing moves before playing towards the side. So if then we had White play something like this, we could see Black forming a nice shape here. So the general idea is something like that. But instead White played here. So this is more focused on building the left side. White is getting close to building a fairly large territory here. And it's time for me to invade the left side. So I played this point. This is always a key point because Black can connect underneath. So it's a good place, a rather safe place for Black to be playing an invasion. And if White does play down here to stop that, then now Black can look at the weakness in this knight's shape here. For instance, Black could even just jump out. And you can see that Black is looking at moves like this in some cases, or at the very least can be playing forcing moves from the outside, for instance at this point and so on. So it will be relatively easy for Black to make a good position, a good shape here. In the game, White extended, and I jumped out once, again looking at the, well, I would probably play, if White plays away, if White plays there, I would be playing an attachment here and starting to cut off this White stone. So there's a threat behind that Black move. So White answered, and I've reduced the left side. I also would like to be able to get some territory in this area. In fact, it's sort of necessary as far as the board position is. I need to get some territory in the center to be able to think I might have a lead. So I don't really want to spend a move protecting these stones. So the following set of moves is going to be a way I handle those two Black stones without actually spending a move on them. So I'm going to try to keep sente, or the tempo, as you might say. So I start with this attachment, threatening to play here next and capture a White stone on the left side on a large scale. So that would be big. So White answers that. And then I play the attachment underneath. And this is forcing, of course, because I am threatening to reduce White's position here, White's territory there. So White answers. I bumped against White. So with this exchange, in a position where in the lower left, White already had a fairly strong shape, so it's okay that I'm reinforcing that. And with this, I've established the fact that I can connect underneath here at any point. So for instance, I played away. Another forcing move on the upper side. But if we assume that somehow White manages to surround Black, I would still have this move, and I can cut here. Although it looks like White can capture the one stone, it's no problem for Black to cut here and white would just be dead on the side. So black does have that connection underneath at any point. And of course, otherwise black can move out into the center. So these black stones on the left side are suddenly fairly safe. So I played these forcing moves. This sequence also, although I said it myself, it was well timed, strengthening myself in the center. And that was a white territory anyway, so it's okay that it's getting a bit more solid maybe. And now I play this move. So like I played this set of forcing moves, and this was the finishing point that I was aiming at to surround this territory here. So it looks like it's a very nice sequence for black. Actually, this move that I played here, this stone, could have been the losing move. And like if it was a 6.5 or a 7.5 point komi, it would have been very difficult for me to win. Even with the 5.5 point komi, it was because of this move that white actually had a chance in this game later. So what I should have played was this move. And the difference here is that when I play this way, the fact that I'm closing off this area is the same as the actual game. The difference is that it's making it much more difficult for white to surround this area. In the game, when I play here, white can actually follow up with a peep here, threatening to push through my two-space jump, and if I answer, white can surround the lower side in a relatively efficient fashion. So actually white, although this is a simplified diagram, white will probably start actually by playing these forcing endgame moves, which are sente for white. They are forcing, so white might play this first and then play here. When white gets to surround this territory in this efficient fashion, this is probably going to lead to at least an extremely close game. There were some variations where I was getting a half-point difference, so that's a 5 or a 6-point win for black. I was finding it actually difficult to find a way for black to win 6 points, so most of the time I was getting a half-point win for white when I was getting into these half-point games. So the fact that I've allowed white this potential to surround that area very efficiently makes this probably, it could have been a losing move. In the game, we do not immediately get to the point where white should play here. White could have played it immediately, but in the game it's perfectly reasonable that white starts with this and these forcing moves. And that whole variation was pretty much forcing. Now white plays here. White is threatening to jump in here. And with this living group here, although it's a knight's move there, it's not dangerous for white. White can always connect up at this point. So I cut white off from this side, and white has to add something to that knight's move. This shape here is not connected as it stands. White pushed here, and there is the issue of this black group in the center. It's not 100% alive, so white is sort of looking at that sideways. Played the forcing move, and then I played here. This is actually a very subtle mistake. I think this exchange, I might have lost 1 point. I think it was Leela maybe that was showing me this move. This is also a key point in the center, and face value is really hard to see which is better, but in this case it would be something like this. And you can see that white is getting a bit more here, especially if white plays this point later. White will have a nice little territory there, but black is getting a point or so extra on this side when compared to the game, and also has a slightly better position in the center. So on the whole, it's a very slight gain for black, this variation, compared to the game. When I played here, white extended, and I got to play this forcing move and the peep, and I found these forcing moves here seem to be very efficient. But white does get a little bit back here when white peeps at this point. It reduces the black territory to this line. So it wasn't as good as I might have thought about it. It's still a very close game. And I'm going to call this the losing move. So this is a point where white should have played here. This was white's last chance to play there. And like if black moves into the white territory, this is very troublesome. It would be another complicated variation. I don't feel very confident for black actually, because it's going to be very difficult for black to surround this area now. So this looks a bit dangerous. Usually black would just answer this, in which case white covers here. I went a few moves into the endgame here, something like this. An example endgame. Yes, an endgame like this would be very, very close. It looked like a half-point difference. If I was asked to choose between black and white, I would probably say that white probably is going to win by half a point. It's going to be very, very close. And that's with only a 5.5 point komi. So nowadays it would be even much more difficult for black. In the game, white cut here, which was... It was a big move, and it was attacking these black stones here, but it didn't turn out to be forcing, because I played once here, and then I could play away. So I got to play this big point, which gets rid of that potential for white to surround that territory efficiently. So that was a very important point that I took there. After this, black has a safe win, I say. So we're playing a fairly straightforward endgame sequence here. A nice, interesting tesuji when I play here. This is threatening to reduce white's center. So if white counters with this move, then white adds another stone, for instance, then white's center is going to be reduced like this. Otherwise, if white plays on this side, black has a nice little tesuji on the lower side. Black can play the Atari from underneath. And this would be a disaster for white, because if white takes, this becomes a ko. And if white connects, then black will win by one move in the local fight to capture. So this would be bad. White would have to play this way, but it would not be profitable for white to allow black to push through there. So in the game, white played straight down, and so I did manage to reduce white's territory there a little bit. A nice little sequence. And then I moved back to the center of the board. At this point, I'm about 10 points ahead before komi. So just to go through the rest of the game. This was a slightly slack move. I might have lost a point. And we get to this. It's a reasonable endgame sequence that we're playing here. And finally, I take the one white stone here. A very nice sequence for white, actually, but it's not good enough to win the game. So at this point, I think I'm winning by 9 points before komi. My opponent resigned. So since it was a 5.5 komi game, I had a lead of about 3.5 points. But my opponent resigned at this point. This was my first game against O Meien. He was already a prominent player, although he was still only 7 dan. He continued to take the Honinbo title, for instance, among other... he was in the leagues, the round-robin leagues for a while. He's still a top player in Japan, so he was already a prominent player, and he got better, you might say. At the time, I was just another 5 dan, and it was quite a challenge for me to be playing this person. And it was a very important game in that year for me, because it was the final of the Judan tournament in the 3rd section, and winning this game put me in the final tournament. So the Judan tournament at that time. Judan is a word in Japanese that actually means 10 dan. And so the winner of the tournament is called 10 dan for 1 year at least. And there were it was a tournament in which you could lose one game and still be in the final tournament. So there was leeway to lose one game. There was a separate tournament for players who had lost one round, and eventually they would be able to play the winner of the winners tournament. So I had a number of games against top players to look forward to, and it was just a group of 16 players in all. And so I was in an elite group after when I continued this tournament. So I will continue with some videos for those games that I played in the final section. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, so hit the like button and subscribe if you have not already. Thank you for watching.